Right, year 12. I hope you're doing well and you had a restful half term. So I thought from your perspective, there's probably nothing worse than listening to me talk about the Tudors for like 35 minutes at a time. So I decided to break it down to smaller chunks, okay? So these videos are going to be 5 or 10 minutes long, and that way you can go to the one that you need rather than listen through a whole 35 minutes of me yabbering on. So I have no idea why the camera's so blurry, but we will crack on. So the first one up is the one that I've had quite a few emails from you guys, is Kett's rebellion. Okay, now the reason why a few of you have emailed in, I understand why. Okay, because the rebellion itself is not confusing, but why Robert Kett is on the rebel side and how he finds himself there in the first place and how it all comes about, I get it completely. It is quite confusing, so that's why this short video will hopefully tie up some loose ends for you. So a little bit of background first of all. So the riots that took place under Edward VI were mainly down to religion, political against the Lord Protectors, and enclosure, which comes under economy. Okay, the reason why religion was such a main one was because Edward was a true Protestant. Okay, now some people didn't believe that his reforms went far enough. You know, some Protestants wanted them spread faster and, you know, even more from that side, whereas others were from other riots broke out because Catholics believed that he was wrong and he was a heretic, aka the wrong religion, and they wanted England returned back to Catholicism. The Lord Protectors, now Edward, because he was only a teenager, he had two Lord Protectors who basically ran the country for him or with him, Somerset and Northumberland. Now, you'll notice in a lot of the riots, the aim of the rebellion, they say things like, is to get Edward better advisors. Okay, the reason why they put the finger towards the Lord Protectors is because if they go against Edward, that is treason. Okay, so instead they say things like they wish for better advisors or better advice. What they're basically saying is they want them to be led better by those around them. Because if they said they were anti-Edward or they wanted Edward gone, and if they got caught, they'd probably be hung. And the other main one was all about enclosure. Okay, now remember, enclosure is where the landowners in the town got rid of the workers and the farmers and instead put sheep in fields and put hedges around the outside. Now, this made them quite large profits because they saved loads of money on wages and supplies. Now, that's not a problem. The problem was that in Tudor times, every town had what they called common land. Now, common land was where anybody, poor, destitute, whatever it might be, could use that land to keep themselves, you know, alive. They might put a pig there, they might put a few crops there, something that they can use to keep them literally above the poverty line. Now, what was happening was these landowners were also taking the common land and enclosing that too. Now, to the poor people, you know, and the lower classes in Tudor times, this was way too far. Okay, this took away their livelihood because they had nothing else apart from that. And also, the Tudors, throughout the whole time since Henry VII, that common land had always been there for them. It had been one thing that the rich had done for the poor. So when the landowners start taking this up, this is too much for the people. So what Cromwell does, again, as one of the chief advisors to Edward, what he does to try and limit this, he puts a tax on the amount of sheep you have. The thinking was that because the rich will be now getting taxed on the number of sheep, that will stop them possibly enclosing that amount of land. Okay, and the next month, okay, Edward also releases a statement that says that some enclosures will have to be ripped down. Now, when he gives that announcement through Somerset, he also says that those people who do tear down their enclosures will not face punishment. Now, think about how this looks from the poor point of view. The poor think, all right, the king wants all enclosures destroyed, he's on our side. Now, that's not what the king was saying. The king was saying that certain enclosures that have got too big or taken up common land would have to come down. Whereas from the poor people's perspective, they were like, right, perfect. And they literally went out in massive mobs and started tearing down the hedges and ripping away the enclosed land. So in July of that year, big rebellion happened in Norfolk. We get a huge amount. Bear in mind, this is the lower classes. The lower class attack loads of enclosed land around Norfolk, including that of Robert Kent. Kett. So this is where it gets the slightly confusing bit. Kett was a high class. He did own land. So why does he join the rebels? Well, actually, he joins the rebels because he realizes that he was wrong in the first place. He was wrong to enclose common land. That common land is there for the people, not for him. So what he does, he realizes that these poorer classes have got a very raw end of the deal, and so he agrees to help them. Now, because he's educated, because he can read and write, he's the perfect person to lead the rebellion. So if you're thinking, why would somebody of high class want to help out the rebels? Well, power, leadership. When people look up to you, it makes people do things that maybe they wouldn't normally do. So soon the rebellion was at 16,000 strong. Now, the reasons why people joined them was not just because of enclosures. Okay, I want to make that clear now. The main reason was because of enclosures. They wanted the common land back, and they wanted some of the hedges taken back to where the landowners actually own the land. The second thing is rack renting and the tenant farmers. Okay, so tenant farmers, most farmers back in Tudor times rented the land off the landowners. Okay, so think about that. The landowner owns acres and acres, and the farmers, called tenant farmers, rent the land from the landowner. Okay, now what was happening was, because of enclosures, that was meaning that loads of land that was normally offered as rent for farmers was being enclosed. So we got less and less land there for the farmers, so that increased the price of that land, and farmers could no longer afford to rent that land. So you can see that annoyed them, because normally they might pay a certain amount each month for that land. That was being doubled, sometimes even trebled, because of enclosure. And then that meant that then farmers had to increase their prices to get the money to pay the rent. So all this had a knock-on effect. Now, the best thing about Kett was that he organised a governing council of representatives and drew up a list of demands. This made it a very, very real threat to Edward. This wasn't a load of, just ex-farmers with pitchforks. This was somebody who had a group that had a leader at the top who was well thought out. They got a council from each village, a person to come into the council from each village. It was democracy. It was also well thought out. And also they had demands. They weren't just, willy-nilly turning up trying to cause trouble. They knew what they wanted. Now, this is the closest we go in the whole Tudor time period to a real class war. Most of the time, it's, an upper class or a nobleman trying to gain back power or remove somebody from religion. This is as close as we come to a class war. So Edward realizes that this rebellion could be quite large, so he offered to pardon them, aka to not punish them if they returned home peacefully. Now, the rebels refused, and that was quite a big change, a big turning point in this rebellion. On the 21st, the rebels siege Norwich and take over Norwich. Now, you're probably thinking, why is Norwich such a big deal? At the time, Norwich was the second biggest town or city in England. So to Edward, the rebels have taken the second biggest city in England. That needs something to be done about it. So he sends 1,400 men, but they were very quickly defeated. So then he sends the Earl of Warwick along with 13,000 men, or 12,000 men with Warwick, and an extra, I think, 1,200 men of German mercenaries. Massive street battles, one of the biggest rebellions we've seen for many, many years, and 3,000 rebels are killed. A little bit of, you might have seen this, a little bit of a little story for you, is when the rebels met the Earl of Warwick, and, the two sides were having a street battle. As some of the archers looked on at the rebels, one of the rebels put down his pitchfork, pulled down his trousers, and got his bare backside and started waggling it in front of the king's men. At that point, an archer from about 100 yards pinpointed straight in his buttock. Okay, I don't know why that's such a famous story or why people remember it, but hey, that's history for you. In the end, Kett was caught along with many of the rebels, and the majority were executed. So the reason why this is slightly confusing is because really Kett, you would imagine, is not the sort of person who would actually join a rebellion of the lower classes, but he does it because he gets, he feels that he was wrong in the first place, and maybe it's his chance to kind of get a bit more power and more say with the king. Right, guys, so well done with this. Any questions, let me know, and we'll speak soon.